love. Everybody run town. See when them youth decide fi build a song, the concrete foundation so that they can't fall down. Some young shots in the big fish get green, no then the beat. Check on the teacher when them draw down the slate. Pay attention now the tune so intricate. Wicked style, no food duplicate. Me and me dread with the comfort setting. Respect you, all beliefs and prophets. No, no, no. We know they seek no static. And if you the bad man, after the bag, we no fit stop it. We ball again. Me and body comfort setting. Respect you. Wow, wow, wow. We know they seek no static. You the gunman. Please stop it. Don't forget about mobile. Man lucky. Mohabub, Ja'art, and the one on the B. Ross Sherman and me Peter, legendary. Ross Banner sing the song, she only want me. Plus, the female artists like Heavy D, Rock Down Gal and Tanya C, Tamika and me friend Sweetie. All about the roots and reality we sing. Me and body with the comfy set it. Respect jubilees and prophets. Yo, we know they seek no static. You the bad man, please stop it. We sing again. Me and smoke with the comfy set it. Respect you all beliefs and prophets. Yeah, wow, wow, wow. See Christ says stop it. If you the bad man, please stop it. One more time. Me and me jet with the comfy set it. Respect you all beliefs and prophets. Yeah, yo, yo. We know they seek no static. And if you the gunman, please stop it, free Christ, yeah, oh. Me and me dread comfy set it, respect you. Whoa, 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 whoa.
International body.
Yo, respect until the man smoke it on. One say body, international. Oh, here we go. Me and me body with the comfy set it. Respect you, all beliefs and prophets. Yeah, yo, yo. We know the seek no static. You the gunman, me after the bag, no fi stop it. We ball again. Me and me jet with the comfy set it. Respect you. Hi, hey, hi. We know they seek no static. And if you the gunman, please stop it. You have Lord Raven, Kenny Morgan, Papa Curly that they chase the boy named Sam Master Lee Chico and Carlton Brown King them love everybody run town. See when them youth decide to build a song, the concrete foundation so that they can't fall down. Some young shots in the big fish get green, no then the beat. Check on the teacher when them draw down the slate. Pay attention now the tune so intricate. Wicked style, no food duplicate. Me and me dread with the comfy setting. Respect you, all beliefs and prophets. No, no, no. We know they seek no static. And if you the bad man, after the bag, we no fit stop it. We ball again. Me and body comfy setting. Respect you. Wow, wow, wow. We know they seek no static. You the gunman. Please stop it. Don't forget about mobile. Man lucky. Mohabub, Ja'art, and the one on the B. Ross Sherman and me Peter, legendary. Ross Banner sing the song, she only want me. Plus, the female artists like Heavy D, Rock Down Gal and Tanya C, Tamika and me friend Sweetie. All about the roots and reality we sing. Me and body with the comfy set it. Respect jubilees and prophets. Yo, we know they seek no static. You the bad man, please stop it. We sing again. Me and smoke with the comfy set it. Respect you, all beliefs and prophets. Yeah, yo, wow, wow, wow. See Christ says stop it. If you the bad man, please stop it. One more time. Me and me jet with the comfy set it. Respect you, all beliefs and prophets. Yeah, yo, yo. We know they seek no static. And if you the gunman, please stop it, free Christ, yeah, oh. Me and me dread comfy set it, respect you. Whoa, 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 whoa.
International body.
Good night, Lisa Lise.
Good night. How are you?
I'm blessed. Mr. Greg is having a little problem, and I guess Dietra, right?
Yes.
Miss Jacqueline is in the background, so I'm gonna just leave you to handle the business until them guys come on. You want me to bring her on now? Oh, there comes
Uh,
Gregory. Here comes
just
Gregory.
give me. Oh,
Here
here
comes
comes
Gregory.
Freddie. Okay, sure. Well, good evening, everyone. Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I see Mr. Morrison is gathering himself.
Yes,
I'll give him
sorry
a
about
couple
that
of
for my
seconds.
tardiness. I was having some problems logging in. I don't know what was going on, but I'm glad I'm here now. Hi, good evening, Lisa,
Good
and
evening, Mr.
good,
Morrison.
and good evening to all our guests out there. It's Wednesday evening again, and we signed up to be here with you, talking on the issues of the diaspora and as it affects Belize and as it affects its citizens um, across the globe. You know, predominantly there's many in the United States, but there are also sprinkles of Belizeans in Canada. I think a good amount, and in England and throughout the Caribbean. And so wherever you are, we're pleased to have you and joining us this evening. We're expecting some guests. I don't know if they're on the way yet, but they'll be joining us shortly today. I could
Yes,
see
Miss
Jacqueline
Jacqueline is here,
has.
and Miss Deidre is also trying to connect. So
Okay,
we're
okay,
we're
good.
hoping that she can join us pretty soon here.
Okay, good. And so, Miss Jacqueline, good evening to you. And we know that you are someone well seasoned in the government services and in also in service to Belize. And so we thank you for joining us. We know you have worked extensively with the prosecution department. You have worked in the immigration department, and you do substantial amount of work with unions and also in different areas of international negotiation on issues. So we want to touch on some of those with you this evening and to see how far we could take this conversation. We also have another guest that is supposed to be joining us, but we'll see if she's able to make connections. So thank you, good evening, and could you please just give us a quick introduction of yourself, and then we'll move into some conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. And I think you've introduced me good enough. Um, I my mantra is preach the word without using preach the gospel without using word. Um, like you said, for the greatest part of my life, I've been in service with Belize um, on the social justice platform. I guess what you can call me is an activist. And I've done this through the trade unions. I've done it through different youth groups. I've done it through my jobs, and I continue to do it now.
Well,
So good activism, Miss Jacqueline. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
and
Thank you
and
for having me.
you wanted to say something, Lisa? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. One of the reasons I was anxious to have you this evening, Miss Willoughby, is to pick on your experience on negotiation, because we see right now in Belize a big issue going on with the government as it is trying to lean in on this state bank project and these development they're doing, that they are now trying to somehow take over private land for this, what they're calling public use, which is basically the eminent domain statute that we have. And there are lots of reasons given, and there may be some valid reason for it, but I also think that it is not an easy issue to go and take private property. And so what are your feeling about that whole process and how we have implemented that in the past in Belize from your experience?
I think State Bank has more history than most of us know. State Bank is a project 13 years in the making with a lot of political history. In terms of the legal issue, the Land Acquisition Act indicates that government can take over properties for public purpose. The issue here is, the sticking point here is, what is public purpose? when you review the act, the big stick that's in the act is public purpose is in the opinion of the minister. So that is why government feels so comfortable in moving after State Bank, because the act really don't give them any real definition as to what public purpose might be. And so it's in the opinion of the minister. In terms of my own opinion, when I review certain case laws in Belize, when the government sought to acquire land that had oil, that was for a public purpose, one would easily say that the public purpose must serve the interests of the citizenry.
Yes.
I'm not sure I can agree with the government to take the land from one private investor to pass it to a next private investor as a public purpose. I have a difficulty understanding, even though the act does not provide sufficient definition, I have a difficulty understanding how this represents public purpose in Belize.
Right. So then is there an intermediate step where the government could then perhaps take this land and keep it in trust for itself, lease it to the investors, because there's no reason to actually own it, I would say, but lease it
What
to
would be
them.
the reason to take it in the first place?
Well,
People
I'm
need
just
to
trying
understand
to
certain
I'm just trying to accommodate what they're saying, that this is blocking potential significant investment in the country from some reliable partners. And so they see
Who are those reliable partners?
I'm only going from what the government is saying. And so they said one of the largest container shipping company was expressing that interest. So I'm just asking those questions from that vantage point.
I think the government is wrong, and I'm of the full view that they would lose. They will lose the action in court.
Okay.
Because how do you justify taking a private land from a private investor and then passing it to another private investor? What's the public purpose there? Because if we're going to weigh things, if State Bank was allowed to continue with their investment, wouldn't they be creating employment? Wouldn't they be bringing foreign currency to the country? And you're now taking, and that's the basic business I'm dealing with. Then you're going to put it in the hands of another private investor who is going to do the same thing. I think what people need to understand is when investment comes into the country, one of the biggest role governments play is to be regulatory. I'm not aware what all they say State Bank did or didn't do, but I know that for State Bank to have started anything out there, the regulatory agents, which is within the government of Belize, would have had to pave the way. They would have had to pay the way. And that is the reason I said it has a lot of political entangling, which I will not get into. It has a lot of political entangling because I cannot see the public purpose. But maybe past Minister Koi, having been a minister in cabinet, can explain to us how cabinet comes up with the issue, how they define public purpose, because the act is bland.
Good evening, Mr. Cowie. It's good to you jump right in and you got right on the hot seat because they are calling on you.
Well, if you allow me to, before I get into the specific issue of that particular project, no, I think we should look back to the study that was done by the previous government. It was $1 million study done, and it was done for the tourist industry, but with specific emphasis on cruise ship tourism. And we have not followed the professional advice given to us for the reason that Our tourist product is a very fragile product. It's nature-based, for sure, unlike many other products which are artificial. Now, being nature-based product, it is fragile. And the study showed that we have to be careful with cruise ship tourists. It took us at that time when it was done, and I believe that ratio has widened. It was at that time when the study was done over 10 years now. It took 4 cruise ship tourists to make one overnight. So evidently, we were getting a better return on our overnight tourists. And what they recommended in the area like the Harvest Key area, where that cruise ship one is, they had recommended pocket-sized ships, which is high. They are like 800 passengers, but they give high returns, but it reduces the impact upon the ecosystem. So I would say that government, and when I speak of government for now, I'm speaking in a generic sense, certainly had not followed that. Instead, we got head over heel trying to increase the amount of cruise ships terminals in this country. So that brings me now to the question of, was there in fact a legitimate reason for the government to intervene? And in one sense, I would say, in a circumstance where the venture have great benefits to this country, as some would say, too big to fail, no? And government do interfere or intervene, I must say, in the economy where it is in the public interest. So if it is a project that is too big to fail, and seeing now that so much have been invested into it, but then the project would become ineffective if what is surrounding it cannot be used. So the question is now being asked, do you believe that the government should have intervened to acquire the land around to allow the project to go through? And I think it's the cost benefit analysis now would need to be made. Do we believe that we should have this cruise ship port? Do we believe that the investment, because of the one of the banks that was involved in the financing of it, who did a foreclosure and made to recover their investment, was able to get a buyer and they bought out that portion? Now, I would say that there may be some merits to have an investor who have gone that far, and rather than to make the project effective or actually not being able to go through, perhaps there might be some merits in the government intervening. But it begins first with, should we have ever gone this far with the issue of tourism? That is cruise ship tourism. So I may not have answered the question directly to say no, they should not. Or yes, they should.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. And I would say I would not answer it deliberately because we need to look more into it. I wouldn't just too quickly say that they shouldn't, and I won't too quickly say that they should. I think we have to look at the cost benefit analysis,
Yeah.
and maybe that's what we should engage in.
Yeah, I do think that I know the original developer of the project went into foreclosure and bankruptcy, but in furthering develop the project and where they stand, it seems that this is an opportunity also for government to make some guarantees, since they are viewing the development of and continued development of the project so important that they make some arrangement with maybe the original investor, developer of the project. I mean, that's also an option to further the project. It doesn't have to mean that he, after spending so much commitment to it, becomes totally excluded from it. There seems to be opportunities that's being missed in my view.
Well, I think that's a very meritorious consideration, and I do support you 100%. In other words, government should first make the attempt to see if he can bring reconciliation between the previous owner and the new investor. So I don't know to what extent they intervene to hopefully to be able to attain that. But I think you have a very good point there, Mr. Morrison.
But and you're right, Mr. Koyu, you didn't answer the question.
Intentionally didn't, he said.
Yes.
I understand why.
Here's the thing. I'm not of the view that issues surrounding this kind of investment ought to have been examined unilaterally. That is to say, you have the environmental aspect, the cost analysis aspect, the returns. It should have been taken as a whole. So what we have here is an investor who, according to the banker, according to whomever, is unable to pay their bills. In the same way, we had the receivership with the shrimp farm and some others. Perhaps government ought to have facilitated or negotiated for a sale if they consider the land so prime, as opposed to acquisition using the term public purpose when we are unaware what that public purpose is for. Because what does that say for investment?
Yeah, it actually, to me, it seems like it would scare off even these current investors to some degree, that government
if
could
government has that kind of control. If government can say, okay, you can't pay your bills, so here where I want to do. I will come in and I just take over. So I don't agree that we should have gone and acquire the property. I would have been more in agreement if government said, you know what, let me provide you with my strongest negotiator so we can get to sell, so that who is owed gets back their money, so we can open the space better to bring in another investor. It has long since been said about Belize that the investor climate is too controlled and too tax-bearing and too heavily taxed. That has always been one of the complaints of investors that comes to Belize. Imagine
that is probably true to some degree, but I think government loses a lot of revenue. We're over-regulated in many ways compared to some of our neighboring countries, but I don't know that we are in fact over-regulated, but compared to other countries, because I don't see the benefit to the public interest in whatever those regulations are.
Government loses a lot of revenue because of poor enforcement.
Yes.
Government has poor enforcement when it comes to revenue. For some unknown reason, we have governments who decide, I'll use the tax service as an example. First, we had the income tax, and then we had GST, and we have customs. And every year, when we attend these budget meetings, we are told about the fall in revenue. And whenever you ask the question about enforcement, you get a lot of mediocre responses. And then government decides, let's amalgamate. We're going to amalgamate, and we're going to have one tax area called BTS. BTS has hardly been in existence. Before now, we want to go to a revenue authority. But none of these amalgamations or change in structure and change in stature is going to fix the issue of enforcement unless we become serious. Government has a lot of tools available to it to recover its taxes from the delinquents. But the best place government recover taxes from are from workers, because they cream off 25% of every working person in this country, providing they have met the threshold. But persons who owe them taxes, it is an issue of enforcement.
Yeah.
I do not believe, and it has not been my experience, and I've read no records anywhere, and no government can convince me that their enforcement is to the level that they have things under control, because that is not the truth. Yeah. That is not the truth. Too many people are falling through the cracks.
Yeah, I know for sure we lose a lot of revenue. I'm almost certain of through these travel agencies and all these tourism vehicles that allow you to do booking outside of Belize, and the revenue never shows up on the sheets, the bookkeeping sheets of the company that's making these booking and these sales and bringing all these tourists to Belize. And I'm
But they're
sure we're
still
losing
collecting.
because of enforcement.
Here's the other issue, though. The consolidated fund is not so consolidated. Because, for instance, the tourist board
Mhm.
collects its own money. When last have you
Yes.
seen an audit from the tourist board?
Yeah, yeah.
So the consolidated fund is not so consolidated.
Mhm.
And so a lot of these revenues, I don't blame the bookings. I don't place any blame on the bookings. Because once these people land, once tourists land in Belize, hotel pay taxes, their environmental taxes, their taxes, their this taxes and that taxes. So I don't blame the travel agents. They have a stake to make. That is the agreement they make with their company. But
Mhm.
why isn't the tourist board money going into the consolidated fund? When will government
That has
take
been an issue
responsibility?
for a long time.
Right.
So it has
I
grown to a
don't want,
humongous amount of money now.
right. I don't want people to be misled. You see, I don't want people to be misled and think that in Belize, we don't have sufficient, or I think we're not doing sufficient to ensure that the consolidated fund is really consolidated. We're not doing sufficient to have our own government funds or our own government cash audited. We have not been audited in however so long. Now, imagine the government is the regulatory authority that ensures civil society is audited, civil society is reporting, but they themselves are not adhering to simple international audit rules and audit their accounts. Money goes in and out of government and people can't account for it. So our policies that we are making, in my humble opinion, is incoherent. As long as we're making unilateral policy, okay, let's make a regulation for BTS, but that is connected to nothing. Who forces those who owe to come and pay? And don't tell me about court, because I know that there's a tax court and I know that there's this court, and it doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. Because you get a simple call from a minister, man, put that one day aside. So our biggest struggles are sometimes our very own ministers of government. It seems that the governments we get in Belize only know how to regulate poor people. But those who pay campaign funds are not properly regulated.
That seems to be quite a ongoing issue, and it doesn't matter which of our government political party is the governing party of the day.
And that's why people of Belize has to understand the power of their vote. We have got to stray away from UDP and PUP politics. And we've got to start seeing and understanding what is important for the growth of our country and what we will leave as legacy for our upcoming citizens when we are gone. People need to understand the value of their vote. It's not voting for a minister, it's voting on certain issues. It's voting to ensure that the people you put there will continue to keep their moral content and will continue to provide socially for the citizens of this country. They elected, I remember during the time, and I'm sure former Minister Koi could speak of this. We have, what's the name of this act again? The Corruption Act that came out. Because I think Minister Koi might have been the only one who have fallen prey to that act. There was a Corruption Act that came out that said Corruption in Public Life Act. And I think not very many persons have been brought to bear under that act. Then there's the Integrity Commission. That almost comes off to be a joke because half of the ministers, and it's my view that not only ministers should go to the Integrity Commission, it is my view that everybody who leads in civil society and manages people's money and holds themselves out as activists ought to go to the Integrity Commission. And that is why we needed UNCAC, because UNCAC is far-reaching. It is not only for government ministers, it is for everyone who does public services or hold themselves out in civil society to account. Unfortunately, in Belize, we don't take the whole issue of corruption in public life serious. Yes, we talk about it. But in my view, that particular act, the Corruption of Public Life Act, needs to be enhanced and needs to be enforced. It needs to be enforced. You had the Penna issue, that went through the door. All these commission of inquiry is almost a waste of taxpayers' money because you sit there for days on end. The reports come out. People are called to answer, and that's the end of it. There are no prosecutions. There are no police. The only persons who face the wrath are public officers who are caught in the net. They are taken to the commission and they try to fire them, but nobody sees that above them there were instructions enforced on them. UNCAC has not yet been signed into law. That is one of the issues. UNCAC has not yet been signed into law. UNCAC needs to be signed into law. People of Belize should be rallying around UNCAC. The Trade Union Congress should be rallying around UNCAC. Unions should be rallying around UNCAC. It has not yet come into law. And that is why politicians, ministers, and even some of our civil society leaders get away with murder.
Do you think, I do support some level of UNCAC, but I do wonder about the fact that having that type of not legislative, but power of justice could somehow infringe on the sovereignty of our country, because we know how those organizations are funded and who are then brought into prosecution. It has its benefit and advantages, but it has that pitfall in my mind that it could be misused by foreign entity that actually fund these type of organization. And I know the United Nations, it's under the umbrella of the United Nations, but we know who mainly fund it, and we have seen some of these evidence in other countries how it is used to cause prosecution, and some and not all.
Isn't that the same issue with ILO and the same issue with the World Trade Organization? The persons who fund it are the ones who are hardly held accountable. Isn't that the same issue Antigua and Barbuda faced in 1997 when they won their case at the World Trade Organization, and to this day cannot be paid because of who funds those organizations? Those are the same issues. But that doesn't mean because those issues exist, we can't take, for instance, human trafficking. The US funds issues of human trafficking in Belize. And as soon as you hear a report come out, it is easy to observe how quickly we jump up and we're looking for somebody maybe we can prosecute. And then the case languishes in the court, and in most instances, the persons are not guilty. We are a third world developing country. We've got to find our identity, and we've got to find how we could build our own people and still have a clout in the manner in which we speak. We may not like everything that is in UNCAC, but the fact of the matter is, if we're speaking to corruption, because that seems to be the buzzword in Belize, everything is corrupt. If we're speaking to corruption, then we have got to have a mechanism that's going to weed out corruption, even if we do not accept every single thing from UNCAC. We should be able to accept some portions of UNCAC that would call us to account. We shouldn't have to wait, as in the case of Barbados, until your ministers leave Belize or until your civil society persons leave Belize, and then they are caught at the Miami airport, and then they spend so much time in the jail estate. That not make it, to me, that doesn't countenance what's happening in your own country. So I believe some part of UNCAC we should be accepting, and it is my distinct view that ministers and civil society leaders should be accountable. Anybody who has anything to do with coherent policies in Belize that falls to our citizenry should be held accountable.
I sense we have now I hope, the issue of the cruise ship port for right now, I take it, because I wish we had at least spent a little more time to examine what I think we were going to do, the merits and demerits of it, the cost benefit. But I think now
we could Mr. Cowie, you could continue on that because I know we jumped, but I wanted to flush that out a little bit more.
I'm saying that maybe we can defer it because I think we have gone into now an area that I think, in fact, is the umbrella area, which is the public sector. And as a public officer myself for 20 years, entered the public sector in 1960. Yes, it was under a colonial period. But I want to preface my opinion and my judgment that I will give. No country in the world, whether it's a totalitarian country, society, whether it's democratic, whether it's fascism, the truth about it, that no state can ever succeed in whatever plans it has and whatever strategy it has for the development of this country without the public sector. That is a reality of modern states. If you do not have an efficient and effective public sector, evidently, the public resources will be wasted. Though corruption, there is no doubt, corruption has a debilitating effect on countries. And Belize is no exception. But let me go back to 1960. And I will say this, however atrocious and inhumane colonialism was with a British colonizer in our case, there was one good thing the British left for the world, and was a very disciplined, efficient, and effective public sector. So the public sector that I entered in 1960, to begin with, to get into it, we first had to pass Cambridge. And then you go in and you will spend 2 years of probation. And then depending on your performance, you will then be made permanent. That public sector, I can assure you, was highly disciplined, highly effective. We had all the main and fundamental characteristics of the meritocracy, of the permanency, of the neutrality. We had the internal controls the public sector took on from the British. Internal controls that have universal standards, international standards. We have some of the best controls. And that's a fact about the public sector. So the period that I was there for 20 years, just before independence, we never had this kind of corruption. And because of the public sector, we were more independent of political influence. Yes, there was PUP. Yes, there was UDP. And yes, we knew among ourselves where we stand. Maybe Joe the lean PUP, maybe Jacqueline the lean UDP, but never did divided us because it was enforced on us that as public officers, we could not publicly identify ourselves with a political party because we had to be neutral. We swear a loyalty not to the governor, nor to the politician. Our loyalty was to the people of this country. But I would say this, as I begin to see the decline of the public sector, somewhat shortly before I left, and I would say that it could have been after independence. Someone asked the other day when we were going into independence if we believe that we were ready for independence. I am convinced that we were ready for independence, but I have a doubt about whether we were ready for democracy. And I will say this because today, looking back, almost 43 years, we have so emasculated the public sector. And we have used it as a patronage system to keep political powers in office. That when you look at the public sector today, it is heavily burdened with a lot of partisan employees who has no qualification to be where they are, but are simply being rewarded for their political support in campaigns. So to me, if we're serious about removing corruption, and I think Marcus Aurelius was right when in his time as a senator of Rome, they brought a bill, I call it a bill somewhat same to corruption in public life, the prevention. And he said that I will support that bill. He said, but at one condition, that we must remember as senators of Rome, we must be upright, not kept upright. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, whenever a society reaches a point where too many of us have to be kept upright, that is going into civil war, crime, poverty. If you look at the symptoms of this country today, however much we may boast about the macroeconomic figures of growth and employment and per capita income, those things,
The disparity.
yeah, but those things in itself is not really development. Growth in itself is not development. Development must come from growth when we have an inequality in the opportunities and in the distribution of that wealth. So to me, when I look back from where I was 20 years in a public sector to what it has become today, and I'm speaking, and I'll say in the generic sense about government, if we are not serious about bringing back the public sector, no UNCAC or no United Nations Convention on Corruption. In fact, coincidentally, I spent 3 hours yesterday in a meeting going through the report of the Inter-American Convention on Corruption, because there was a 30-odd page report which they had prepared. And it was interesting because it was really it was 3 parts: the legal framework, the compliance, and oversight. So what Mr. Klein cited just a while ago, and I just want to end my presentation and we can continue. I went to a meeting of this commission for the review of the Constitution. I was invited by my friend Dickie Bandy. And then, of course, I was urged to speak. And you know what was the question I asked them there? I have no problem with reviewing the Constitution, but I want to ask you here, is there anything in that Constitution that should have been there and not there? Or is there anything that is in there that has caused this corruption as it is, the crimes that it is, and the poverty? Evidently, it is not the Constitution. It was simply because of a non-compliance. We did not comply with it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe this is the kind of discussion we should be having. And like what the good lady said, and please, I am a good follower of American politics, especially with Kamala Harris running. And I will put in a plug for the women. It's about time we men have the damn courage to support a woman.
I quite agree.
And I will say this, and I'm talking for her now. The free world hangs on the shoulder of a woman. If she loses this election, the democratic world could very well be on the verge of becoming totalitarian. And I would say that the same pain and the burden she carries now must remind us of the burden that our mothers carry in that womb with 9 months for us. And I think it's about time we look at the statistics about our women and to show that they are as good in terms of leadership as any other person can be. So to me now, I will come back now to Belize. I think the time may have come for perhaps Belize to look towards a woman for Prime Minister. And I say this not with no flattery. Biologically, statistics have proven that in that person lies more empathy and compassion. Not that we men are not having empathy and compassion. So if we can seriously at least try to prove Socrates wrong, who said that he had some serious concern about democracy, and I could understand why. He said, what's the use of having free speech and you have nothing to say? If we, as Belizeans, cannot assert ourselves in terms of participatory democracy, beyond just going to the polls for 5 minutes with the ballot, Belizeans as a whole have to put country above partisan politics. We need to participate. We need to hold the government accountable. We are the people with the power. The government does not have power. We delegate authority to them to manage our affairs. It's about time we, the people, assert our power. And there is present laws. And I've said this before, whenever you see, and one of the great transgressions right now of governments of today and yesterday, how can you say that in the Constitution and the finance that prepare for audit of the public funds, and over 7 years or more, these funds have not been audited? That could never happen in our free and just society. How could we be spending 1.5 billion or more a year? And that has not been
Audit. Right.
So, who should make government accountable? We, the people.
People.
And we must learn now that we need to participate more. And the very things that we believe are dividing us in terms of our partisan politics are not the thing that should divide us. Because we have a lot in common. We are Belizeans, and as Belizeans, we must unite for the good of this country. So I would like indeed that we go back to the issue that all these faults that we are finding, corruption, poverty, crimes, is because we have emasculated the public sector.
I want to do.
I
Go
like
ahead,
I
Miss.
like I like the fact that you raised the issue about the public sector, because the public sector you describe is is much the same public sector I joined, and I have been in the public sector for 34 years. Um, Ironically, from the days of the governor, when the first regulation, which was a small book that came out, from that until now, there is a section in the regulation that says we're not supposed to have anything to do with party politics. We're not supposed to go visit a minister. We're not supposed to do any of those things. But I think that even though that is placed there, that operates more of a sword than a shield, because it is the very ministers who hires people politically, who claims IMF reports for the last 20 years that I have read have said the same things over and over. Public service is too big, cabinet is too big, oil is drying up, tourism is booming. It says the same thing for the last 20 years. And when the government, this recent government came in, quickly we had to reduce our increments or your increment fees by 10% because we didn't have any money. But beyond that period of austerity, you know how much more people the government has created space to hire politically? And I agree with you. They have been hired without the best qualifications. They have been hired to cover up anything the government want to cover up. The neutrality in politics becomes, for public officers, becomes difficult. It becomes difficult because those who have been politically employed feels that they have an ode now to that particular minister that hired them. Another assault on our public service is the implementation of chief executive officers.
Yes.
Whereas I understand that politicians has to have a connection between the social obligation of the public service and that of their constituent members, installing a chief executive officer that quote unquote is a political liaison was not at all and is still not at all useful to the public service. We could have gone the route of Jamaica, who has executive agents and their permanent secretaries. And in both manifestos for the government of today and yesterday, as you described them, they both indicated they would restore permanent secretaries, which would have brought back some hope to the public service. That has not happened. That has not happened. Instead, they have upgraded CEOs to be accounting officers. How can your political liaison be an accounting officer? He has a conflict of interest. The public service, I encourage anybody to go into the public service, because without the public service, there's no private sector. And so this silent war that we have between the two, the public service has been emasculated because certain departments has become political toys. Certain operatives operate to hire more than the Public Services Commission. The Public Services Commission, to an extent, has been toyed with. We have been saying for years that the Public Service Commission needs its own secretariat. Can you imagine today that when the CEO of Public Service does not want certain cases to go to the Public Services Commission, he withholds those cases? I had a recent conversation.
Before you moved on, let me just introduce Angela Flowers, who just joined us. Good evening. And we're continuing our discussion, and we'll get with you in a moment. Thank you for coming in. Please continue, Ms. Willa.
Yeah, most recently, I have an issue brewing at the commission. I spoke to the CEO and I said, man, why haven't these documents transitioned to the Public Services Commission? I was flabbergasted for him to tell me, you think I will send anything up there when that might be the end of my career? Who gives him the right to withhold documents? Who gives him the right to do that? When politicians decided that they would bring CEO, what they brought were controllers of robots. Because the reality is, a CEO owes more obligation to his minister than he does to the advancement of the public service. And public officers don't realize how screwed they are. Because, right, who sits on the commission? People who have never worked in the public service. People who have never worked in the public service is adjudicating public officers. Some of these things are incorrect. It is incorrect. And I raised the issue of UNCAC, but because I like to be fair to everybody, let me tell you what is our report card for UNCAC. We have ratified UNCAC, and we were supposed to create national legislation, including the Prevention of the Corruption Act and the Criminal Code. You hear anybody get charged under the Prevention of Corruption for the Prevention of Corruption Act yet other than public officers? Belize Integrity Commission. How long have we heard that people are not going to the Integrity Commission to report? You see anything happen today? In fact, when you look in at the Integrity Commission Act, the strongest area is if those who sit on the Integrity Commission reveal anybody's secret, they will be fined. Not the one we're not going to report, you know. Not the one we're not going to report. Then there is the anti-corruption strategies and preventative measures and criminalization and enforcement of anti-corruption law. You hear that? You hear anybody getting at that yet? You have the definitive agreement. You see any minister from that get arrested yet? You had the passport scandal. You see anyone that ain't come to a court yet to be charged? Then I had the chips and biscuit case. Way back when with the passport issue with Kim Lon Chi and with the past prime minister and a minister. Do you see any of these people being convicted for anything? Listen to the challenges, the areas we have challenges. We need to establish an independent anti-corruption commission that is empowered to investigate, prosecute, and sanction. You think anybody that believes want that? You think any politician want that? That the commission will never come on board. Belize needs to enact and enforce legislation to criminalize bribery and embezzlement and other corrupt practices. That only catch public officer. If a public officer is deemed to be stealing, he go in at the commission with all of the charges there, so, but not a minister, not a CEO, not a high-ranking member of any of these governments have ever been charged. The need to transparency and accountability in government operation. The government are the master regulatory, you know, but they don't have no audit for their account. They don't have they bring you to the table to negotiate without facts. You don't have no accounting records to see what exactly is in the government coffers. All you are told, we have to go to austerity measures. No, the new buzzword is we have to have contributory pension. When I was the president of the union, that issue came up and I rejected it. And I rejected it because at the time, the government of the day had taken an increase of 10% raise in pension. Even today, when you look at estimates for the last 5 years, 31 ministers enjoy $1.8 million annually in pension, while 2,500 public officers enjoys just over $500,000. And I had to tell public officers we stay 35 years versus one minister who might stay 10 years. So my issue simply, if we want to talk corruption, we have to have coherent policies. The citizens of Belize need to stand up. I remember when the past prime minister came into office, I sent him a letter and I said, congratulations on your new employment. Please be advised, I will check your report card quarterly, that if you're not doing the right thing, I'm going to come after you. People need to understand that your vote at the polls represent you are an employer of the employee, the minister. Women need to arise. Women need to be given better voices, because
as you speak of that, I want Miss Angela to jump in and talk about the empowerment of women as she sees it in Belize, because she has had some active role in that in the past. Good evening. Angela, can you hear me?
Chairman, just a quick question. Can you give us a brief intro on Dr. Flowers so our audiences are aware of who she is?
Okay. She has recently moved back to Belize from the United States. She's I must do a total disclosure. She is my niece, so I know a bit about her, and she recently moved back to Belize after doing a lot of work with homeless, counseling and providing resources for them in California, Los Angeles in particular. And currently she's a doctor in psychology, and she's working as a professor, assistant professor at the University of Belize. And I hope she could hear me. I think she fell off the grid there just now.
I can hear you.
Okay, could you please just see what you could do with empowerment of women? One of the issues that we've seen is very necessary in Belize.
Okay. Good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are watching the show. My name is Dr. Angela Flowers. My apologies, I am not able to start my camera. For some reason, I think the platform is not compatible with my Apple, so forgive me for that. Just a small correction to Mr. Morrison. I have a doctorate in social work, not psychology. But that's all right. There's one thing that, is it Mrs. or Miss Willoughby? Miss Jacqueline said, good evening, Aditra.
The voice is gone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Miss Willoughby, is it Mrs. or Mrs.? I want to be able, I'm saying it correctly. Can you hear me?
I think it's Mrs.
Mrs. Okay. One thing Mrs. Willoughby was saying about being the employers of our government and the employers of, I would want to say our community. I think that's one thing that I have noticed here coming back to Belize, that people do not, I don't even just want to say women, I want to say people have a sense of or a lack of power. I think I see my Belizean people as people who, for the lack of a better word, are satisfied with bare minimum. And I'm saying that because I've had so many wonderful experiences since I've been back with different establishments, with the political atmosphere here, and with many other things that I could name, where it just seems that it's okay to just accept the bare minimum. One of the things that I do teach my students in social work is that you always have to remember that we are the employees of the people, that our first and foremost I want to say the first right of people is to make assure that their needs are met. And as social workers, we are servicers of the people. They do not go to them and they are our clients, but they do not get something from us because we have it and they need us. They do, but also if they did not need us, we wouldn't have jobs. And so I always tell our social workers, when you go and you meet with people, always understand that you are being employed by them. And I say that the same for social workers. I say that for doctors. I say that for policemen. I say that for teachers. Because if we did not have people, you wouldn't have a job. These are all service provider jobs. Okay? And I understand and I see that there is such a lack of power on people's part. And that goes from just getting a service, going to a agency and getting a service, to politics. People feel that we are there so that we can service them rather than them serving us. And that seems to be a consistent theme that I'm seeing over and over. And as for let's go back to the question that Mr. Morrison asked me to address, women. I can't say enough to our women how powerful you are, but you do not take advantage of that power. When I say you, I'm talking to myself, because sometimes I find myself in that rut. And sometimes I have to shake myself and say, wait a minute, Angela. This is not you. You just don't sit down and take what's been given to you if you do not agree with it. But I've observed over and over.
Where are some, just not to interrupt you too much, but where are some of those areas that those powers that you speak of could be implemented by people? And I know voting and holding government accountable is one, but where are some of the other areas, and how could people that find them or feel themselves powerless start asserting and start questioning government within the environment that we have construct so far? And how do we need to deconstruct that to make it more viable?
Let me give you a good example. Let's start with our hospital. Okay, and I know that has been a bone of contention, and that has been a discussion, age-old discussion, right? I noticed, I've observed when I go to the hospital that KMH, that there's a lack of service. There's a lack of good service. It appears that I don't know if there's a lack of training, because where I am at UB, I teach nurses, and a lot of nurses. There are a lot of doctors at the KMH. However, you see a lot of things. People come in, they don't say good morning. They don't use proper policy and procedures. You wait for long periods of time. Sometimes you have to pay people on the side to get what you want. And it seems like we are actually going to, let's say, KMH because we are begging them. Not that they're our employers. All the nurses and the doctors, they are employed by our community. If you can agree with me on that.
Yes.
But people just sit there and take the okie dokie and don't seem to, they complain. People walk up and down and they complain. But no one gets in there and say, let me address this with you. Let me speak with someone. Everybody take the lack of service and say, I guess this is Belize. Why does Belize have to be like that? And that's just one small example. Another example, I went to a shop, it's not an agency, but someone to fix my car, paid thousands of dollars, and everyone just seems to be like, oh, we're not going to we're not going to call you. I have to be calling you to ask you what's the status of my vehicle, rather than you calling me and saying, hey, this is Miss Flowers, this is what's going on with your vehicle, this is what we're doing, this is whatever. And it feels like if that's being done to me, that means that's being done to a whole lot of people. But the people that are coming for this service, that are the employers of this shop, take the okie dokie, say, I guess it's Belize and this is what we do. So there's so many little things that I see, and it doesn't have to be the politics of it, but they're everyday things that I see that happen with our Belizean people, that we just seem to sit back and have a laissez-faire attitude. And I know I'm kind of speaking to the choir, preaching to the choir, but what is it that we can do to change that? Which means changing mindset. And what is it? How can we start changing mindset? For me, that's starting way back when you were in school. Because obviously, when you're in school, that's where you start to gather your thoughts. That's where you're trained. So, and it's not just school, it's even in our families, in our communities. We have to start from there. But we need a change in mindset. And that doesn't come overnight, because we didn't get here overnight. We didn't get where we are overnight. So there needs to be a change in mindset.
Go ahead.
When I think women empowerment, I like to start with me. I recall when I joined the public service, men had a problem with a woman telling them something. A woman must first come to the table feeling empowered. So let me start from your house. Belize is homely. We are traditional. We are always, we're known for homeliness. It is almost natural for us as women, because that's how we were reared spiritually. It is almost natural for us to come to the workplace and want to mother men, or just to mother people. There has to be a limit on that. I'm not saying come to the workplace and decide that you will just be mean. I'm saying come to the workplace and control that value to the extent that as a working partner within males, you would be respected. Women, I usually say some of our own downfall is we are our own worst enemy.
Are you saying that to women, or are you saying that in general to Belizeans?
To women. I'm speaking. The topic we have on the table is women empowerment. Sometimes as women, we have to face our own issues. All right. We would be quicker to have a quarrel with another woman who speaks against a man who does something wrong than to say, let us stand up and say this thing is wrong. How do we empower ourselves? We must first know we worked. Know we worked. When you step into the office place, when you step into the boardroom, when you step into the conference room, when you step in, anyway, you must step with a certain level of confidence, knowing your worth. You must make sure that you put yourself to the level of having the necessary access to education that you can. And make I tell you, that not only mean degree. That not only mean degree, because I know some public officers who never had a degree, but run the Ministry of Finance as if it was their own home. So I'm not only speaking to formal education. I'm speaking to common sense. I'm speaking to morals and values. We must learn to share with one another. Learn to pick up one another rather than put down one another. Understand me? We must learn to support. There are times when men say to us, you must step on your period, or you have to whip out your titty for breastfeed, and we're looked down. We're looked down because of those things. And some of us cower away from it. But women must learn to appreciate who we are. We are emotional. We bring stability to the table. We rear children. Men can't rear children. None of these things are impediment. These things are strength. It is the ability to run and chew chewing gum at the same time. When you step in at the boardroom to have your conversation, do not beg to have a seat. Take your seat and have something to contribute. Governments, communities must open up opportunities for women who are entrepreneurs. The one who make it bread, I feel that we must have respect for everybody. I say from the drain man to the boardroom, we must have respect for. If the woman selling bread, she's an entrepreneur. Opportunities must be provided for her because maybe she might not be able to get a bachelor's degree in economics, but she understands the economics of the day that would help her to take care of her children so that those children will not end up in the system, so that those very same children would become the future of tomorrow. Men has got to learn to respect us. Look at our political parties. I don't care what none of them say. They don't got no respect for women. Not one of them got no respect for women. Women are simple placeholders in these parties and are not necessarily decision makers. This has been for years. We must learn to take part in decisions. We must learn to take part in accounting. We must not take no for an answer. In the public service, when I remember as the president of the union, for the most part, the unions, in my view, here and in the Caribbean, has been quote unquote a boys' club. When I went to a particular conference and I said to them, I started to review the reports and I said, but hold on, my union, they pay money to out your man. Now what would they use the money for? There were no audits. There were no proper reports. There were only 2 women who were around the table as presidents of unions. Our union is the second oldest union in the Caribbean, in the region, only to Jamaica Civil Service. So I sat there and I said, I kept raising my hand, trying to be nice, raising my hand and asking, could you tell me where are the accounts? I'd like to review the accounts. I want to review the report. I want to see what we're doing to grow workers in the region so that I could bring it back to Belize. I want to see what my money is doing. And I was shut down. And I said, this no last for too long. Not with this woman here. And I pulled my chair out because I only have 5 feet 4 inches. So I needed to be seen and heard at the same time. I pulled my chair out and I climbed on top of the conference table. And I said what I had to say and did what I had to do. I left a legacy in the region. Because up to now, when my members go, they say there was nobody like Miss Willoughby. Today, we have reports on the table. Today, women are respected. But had I not gotten up and told these men what the position was, the status quo would have continued. The status quo for women in Belize continues because men, political parties, employers, they're not stupid. They know full well that women are the carriers. The unfortunate thing is women have not yet learned it. If you look in political parties, who are your street captains for the most part? Women. If you look in your workplace, who are your clerks? Mostly women. You look within your health system, who are your nurses? Mostly women. Yet when you looked at the very top, the only persons you see are men. And women are still mothering men. Women need to learn their own worth. Nobody is going to respect you if you go into the workplace and you whine and you don't know your worth. Women has got to stop beating up.
I hear what you're saying. What about the role of women within the family structure and some of the decline we have seen in Belize, and not only in Belize, but throughout the world and in the United States and many places, as we see single family parenting and the burden of rearing the kid mostly left on the woman. How do we make some of those dynamics work with these realities?
Belize has lost, in my mind, about 2-3 generations. That is why we're in the social rut of crime, and we're caught up in this web. We've lost that to grandmothers who went away in the US, or mothers who may have gone away. Not to bring them down, they went for a positive purpose. But then the children were left here with grandparents who were not strong enough to issue the discipline. Then there's the teenage pregnancy years. And then there's the gang violence years. So we've lost generations. And while we have been losing those generations, we did not have a social system that said, you know what? Let me scoop you up and try to help you. So when a young girl gets pregnant in Belize, all we teach them to do is how to prepare their breasts and rub their belly. Nobody puts them in a parenting class. So when the real life child, and not the dolly, starts crying, they know how to manage that situation. But remember, that single mother in this 21st century herself was not taught how to be a woman or a mother. So now this new baby is imposed upon her. It will take a social system to address that. It will take a government to say, you know what? You're going to attend parenting classes. In the previous government, we had the pantry system. They had a pantry system. And whereas I think it was a good idea, it was, in my mind, half-baked and without responsibility. For instance, that program initially started in Colombia. As you may know, Colombia, for the most part, was a drug-ridden town. The then government of Colombia says, you know what, we're not going to have this anymore. We're going to try and see how we could help our people out of poverty, replace back families together, and come back to family values. Because what you learned at home is what you bring to the workplace. It's not very different. It's the strongest institution God made, and it was family. And the rules and the principles of family applies everywhere. And what they did was they said, I'm going to give you a pantry, and I'll give you a boost. You will have this for a period of 2 years. The pantry is so that your school-age children will be in school. The boost is so that you get whatever else you need, but you will only have it for 2 years, because within that 2 years, you should have joined an apprentice program or gotten yourself back in school to show the government that you intended to do better. I like that system because it was a social system, a temporary one, that helped you to transition from poverty, from lack of values, to being somebody in society, to being able to teach your children how to be better persons in society. Instead, we took on only part of the program. We started to just give out pantry. And then people took the pantry and started to sell it. We did not cause them to have some obligation or some responsibility before they were given the given the actual pantry. And that is why I come back to my point and said, as a government, as a community, we are not making coherent policies. I listened to Dr. Angela as she spoke to social workers. I'm sorry for social workers in Belize, because one, they're limited. Two, they're expected to be all over the place at the same time. Three, they're not paid well. And for their own sakes, they don't have any counseling for all that they have opened up themselves. So I believe social work is a way to carry out things in Belize, but they're under-resourced. They're under-resourced. I can tell that from the court system.
That's the point I wanted Dr. Angela to speak on, the resources and what she's seeing in terms of the area of social work.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Willoughby, for recognizing that, because yes, we are limited. Some of the things that I observed is that there is a battle between the old and the new. The new school of thought and the old one. And that's where a lot of where the resources are lacking, because we're sending our social workers out there to do things with new perspectives, but we are not ready for those new perspectives. That's one thing, right? Two, yes, the resources, they're overwhelmed. They are given tasks that the community one is not ready to accept. But when I say ready, the community have not been educated enough to accept some of the new resources that are being given to them. Because it's not that we have no resources. We have resources, but we have not enough, and we have a community that is not ready and willing to accept.
Could you speak a bit of the specifics that you're talking about, where it might be not sufficient, but there are, and it's not being used?
Mental health. Let's look at mental health. That is one of the big ones. Mm-hmm. In the country of Belize, there are approximately 3 psychiatrists for the whole entire country of 400,000 people. There is about 10 psychologists, right? So you could imagine how much mental health issues are going unresolved because we have so little resources. So there is the resource, but we do not have enough. We also have to educate our community that mental health is a good thing. It's a progressive thing. It's not something that you look at it and you shun it. People who have mental health illness, we always think, oh, they're crazy. But there are lots of people walking around here who are functional, but do have a mental health issue. So we have to stop demonizing mental health. So we have the community needing to accept that this is something real. We need our government to help us with more resources. At the University of Belize, we have 6 social worker lecturers. 6 for the entire university. And some of those lecturers are also doubling up as counselors. So you can see where everyone is stretched thin. So that's just one of the examples where resources are there, but they're so limited. We also have no resources in the school. We go back to the empowerment of girls, of women. We cannot be empowered women if we're not empowered girls. There are lots of our females who are living some really sad existence, being victims of domestic violence, being victims of sexual abuse, being victims of incest, and a whole array of other things. Am I still on?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Yeah, being a victim of a whole array of things. So we cannot have empowered women if we do not have empowered girls. Where do we see that in the schools? Are that being taught? Are we being empowered in our schools? Are our girls being taught to stand up for themselves rather than accept the patriarchal behavior of our society? So we cannot have one thing without the other. Our schools are in a sad state of affairs, and it's not horrible. We do great at academics. However, when it comes to our social environment and looking out for each other and being a community and banding together and using our resources, because sometimes we feel like the resources are out there rather than understanding that sometimes we are our own resource. We are our own answer. When you go see a therapist, people feel like when they go see a therapist, the therapists have the answers. Therapists do not have answers. You have your answers, and the therapist guides you along to get your answers. The government do not have our answers. We have our answers, but we have to understand and believe in each other and believe in the community that we're a part of.
I asked the question.
Hello.
Go ahead, Mr. Cody.
Oh, I'm trying to see how I can process all the issues that we are raising, and evidently they are relevant to the interests of our human persons. No? But let me go first to the issue before I go to the health sector. Let me go first to the issue of these prejudices. I am of the strong opinion that this gender prejudice and discrimination against women is a social construct. It has nothing to do with the biological makeup. And that social construct, to a great extent, was created by men, and to some extent, tolerated by women.
That was the point.
The time has come,
Yeah.
and that is why I said what I said before. I think it's about time men, not only in the East, but in the world, and especially at this moment in America, to have the courage, to muster that courage, to accept that the freedom of this free world hangs on the shoulder of a woman, Kamala Harris. I believe that she is as fit, and I have read a lot of history, and I have read a lot of crisis in America about leadership. But I can say this, by my summation of her, she has all that it needs to lead the free world. And it has nothing to do with because she's a woman. So I think this gender prejudice is just a social construct created by men and perpetrated by them. So it's somewhat like racism. This differentiation in racism about blacks and whites, that's a social construct. And whosoever invented it must now disinvent it. So the Caucasian and the whites who invented it, they must disinvent it. So I would say to the men, I think you have to disinvent and stop this belief that we are different and one is superior to the other. No. What I see in the partnership between a man and a woman is a symbiotic relationship. Both of us are partners. It's not a woman standing behind a good man. It's two good persons standing side by side that comes to the table with their own values, but collectively enhance the good of the partnership. So I think men has a good amount of remorse and to seek redemption in their own minds that in a way they was the one who invented this inferiority complex. And now they must help to change it.
Yeah.
I want to end on that point with the case of women. And I want to say this to the women. And this applies generally. And I think it's the reality of a human being. Don't let anybody define your self-worth. You do that, you become a slave to the person. You define your self-worth and you are a free person. So to this long-standing discrimination, it's not only hurting women, it is hurting all of us.
It hurts society.
There are some great values that could enhance the world and society generally. So why not use it?
Yeah.
Why not put these women talents and their skills because they're as good as anything we have.
Yeah.
I will end on that. Now let me quickly go to the health system. You know, I was involved in the design of the health system for the country. I did not diagnose it. The diagnosis was done under the previous government at the time, headed by Mr. Esquivel. But when we came to office in 98, and I became Minister of Health, I had the responsibility to implement this. And I want to say this because the lady was pointing out to something she saw at the Galosha. And what she said, I think is true. Because I have been there myself, although I've spent some years there as the Minister of Health. But the truth about it is that our health system, and as you can ask I think it's what you call it, the Secretary General of the United States, right, who is the highest man in the federal government for health. And we were at a conference in Mexico City with the World Health Organization. And when the time came for the Cubans to present their case, and after they finished, you know what he said? He's now high up in the federal government in America. He said we must take our page out of the health system. Because a health system that is designed in the culture of prevention, community-based, is the best health system for the world. We go for the culture of prevention, and then we only cure what we cannot prevent. But the reality of the world, and it has been proven scientifically, that all our chronic non-communicable diseases are preventable. It just has to do with our lifestyle.
Mhm.
So the system we had designed for Belize, to me, was a very good system. It's true we couldn't afford what I would consider the comprehensive package from the primary up to the secondary and tertiary. We just could. But the package that we set of quality healthcare and free access at the point of delivery, that in itself, because of the subversion of the public sector that we spoke about earlier, is why that system has been subverted. So you're coming right back again. That what the lady is saying she saw is true what she saw. And it's a reflection. And I will leave you with this, ladies and gentlemen. My life has taught me that in every human institution, wherever you see problems at the bottom, it's a reflection of problems at the top. And that is what we are seeing in our own country. I wanted to try to see if I could take everything that you were saying and put it together and give you my views.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colley. And you made a good point that part of what we see is reflective, because when I look at it, I see that particularly in Belize and probably in the United States, a majority of women are teachers, teachers teaching the young people, but yet we don't see that value system that is inherently women being implemented to these young people that's being taught. And so I beg to say, and you said maybe it's the men and it's that needs to deconstruct it and both in terms of the power structure between men and women and between the races of white supremacy, and then it is relied on the white people to deconstruct what they have built. But I don't know if that will ever happen because it has some inherent advantages for those people that hold that power. So somehow something subversively need to happen. Yes, it will take good, honest men and both black and white and whoever to start making these changes. But somehow something needs to happen that empower these people that are not sufficiently served by these systems.
Well, I think you struck a chord there just now, and I just again want to make a final comment before I, put that back. I think Karl Marx had some merits to when he said that he referred to philosophers as armchair philosophers. He said they spent all day complaining and finding faults. He said, but they never look for solutions. What I would like to see, no doubt, and this very forum, which I believe has gained a lot of credibility because of the many good guests that come on the show, including the two ladies that are here now, that we have been disseminating a lot of relevant information to make for a better world and for better governance as a whole. So I would withdraw for right now to say that if we can only not become prey to Karl Marx saying, I think we must begin to now pursue in a very serious way, because we have identified a lot of the problems in Belize. But I think we have to now pursue solutions. We need to be able to fix it. And I like something, I have been following Kamala every day. And the wisdom that she displayed at those two meetings, the one at Ellipse today, and the one she gave a few days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked up two words that he said that were very important. He said they are talking about getting by. He said, well, people just don't want to get by. They want to get ahead.
Yeah.
So I think when he spoke of our opportunity economy, she was so articulate, she was so incisive in explaining what she meant by it. So all I will finish on that point is indeed, women, we must now help you to the extent that you have helped us. We owe you a debt to make sure now that when they are running in elections, Mr. Morrison, we must have the courage to come out and support them.
Yes. Yes, yes. And more women participation as candidates needs to be.
Some areas I think women can be enhanced and um, empowered. It does definitely start in our schools. We used to teach simple things like civics, general knowledge, how we are governed, how you take care of yourself, and that kind of thing. That has to be restored. So we have to go through our education system. That is a way they have access to education. Another area is leadership. I remember in Finland, when I was in Finland on a negotiating trip, one of the things that rose over there was participatory politics with a quota. The women were not participating in political parties. And there was this group of women who pushed until they got a law that now Finland has a quota. So it's a safeguard, a mechanism that ensures women enters the arena of leadership. And this is not only in political parties. I recall when I was to join the union, it was an issue. Some of our own males in the union were women. No, it didn't matter. I knew who I was and where I intended to go. There has to be better economic opportunities for women. In truth, a lot of us are single mothers. And in truth, we are left with the bag to rear children and work and pay the bills. And so men has this mentality that because we have that, we're to remain quiet and we could do that. And we're still living in a society in Belize where nobody wants to turn on the television and see any infomercial about their mothers or about women. We're still living in a society like that. But the reality is, if better economic opportunities were provided for women so that they know that their homes are secured, some of us would step out. Workplace discrimination and inequalities. You see this every time in issues of promotion. I've already explained to you that most of the time, and a lot in the public service, we have mostly men bosses. You notice I use boss and a leader, right? We have mostly men bosses as opposed to women coming up. And unfortunately, a lot of the males in the public service and some of our women don't mentor the younger ones to achieve the same end. There's an imbalance. There's an imbalance in how we are paid. We are expected to carry a heavy load. These things can be fixed by policies, by laws. In the same way, we create domestic violence law that says certain things are supposed to happen. We're supposed to be able to create gender equity laws. Notice I didn't use the word equality there. I said gender equity law. We're supposed to be able to address social norms and cultural practices. Belize is an ethnic makeup. And in most of our different social or cultural groups, there are certain rules that aligns to women that does not necessarily align to men. For instance, in some of our group, customary law says certain females can be married by age 14. Even though our Married Women Act says you could be married more at 16. But those laws fight against each other and it creates dualism. Because by the time there's interference in that, it creates a whole other scenario. So there has to be some balancing of social and cultural norms. There has to be better.
I wanted to ask Dr. Angela. I know that there is a constitutional reform going on, and they're soliciting and canvassing the general public for information. What do you think, if you have any idea, as some of those issues that could be introduced that could help in laying the foundation for empowering young women, girls, and women within our society? You're on mute.
I want to say Miss Jacqueline was doing a great job of setting down those different. Because you know, I just want to go back to the whole education system part, because I feel like our children spend a lot of time in the education system. Our children spend most of their time at school, correct? They're not at home. So I feel that the family does play a big role in how we see and how our community is involved. But we also have to remember that our schools play a big part. And I'm not saying to give the school the job of the family. However, we are not working together as a community, as a family, and as a school together as a village to help our children get to that next level. So there needs to be a little bit more going on in our school, a little bit more groundwork in terms of not just doing the academics, but even putting in teaching our children about policy. Our children are not too young. We look at children as, oh, they're those little things that they don't know what they're doing because they're not of age yet. Yes, they are. Why can't we teach our children policy? Why do you think our women don't want to go into politics? Because a lot of times our women don't understand. It's one, yes, we have a patriarchal society, but two, they don't understand. So if we understand policies, if we understand legislation as children, as young people, we would have a little bit more leverage once we become adults. We don't have that. We learn a lot of that. If we don't have that in our family, if our families were not already politicians or they were already service advocates, we don't get that. We just kind of go into the flow of, oh, we find a job and that's what we do. So I feel like there's a gap in terms of what we're doing in the schools that we need to kind of reconstruct. And I feel like right now we feel like we have a good educational system, but there's always room for improvement. So I want to say that one of the areas that we need to look at is taking a look at our educational system and how we can revamp that. So we're looking at children who are coming into our communities prepared and not ill prepared. Because I'm going to tell you, I'm not calling out anyone, but as a teacher right now, our children are so ill prepared. They do not understand what is it like to be in the workforce. They do not understand what is it like to be an employee or the employer, and they do not understand what it's like to be an advocate. They cannot even advocate for their own selves.
Can I give
because we interfere, that happened because we interfere with the curriculum and take out general knowledge. We take out civics and we take out how we are governed. We take out geography.
Were those things done deliberately to undermine our society, you believe, or were they just oversight?
For which oversight? Then there are four big oversight. When you have picnic, we can't even tell you what happened in the National Assembly. They need to be put back. These things need to be put back in our curriculum. So I concur with Miss Angela. I used to teach at the university, I believe, and I used to tutor at one of the universities in the Caribbean. And I tell you, when I go into the classroom with my University of the Belize student, at some point I became disappointed because the kind of help I have to give to them so that they will pass, they don't watch the news. They don't know how to put the issues together. Then they look on the house meeting and they don't understand half of what they see. They don't make the decisions that they need to make. And I don't blame the children. I blame the fact that we had an education system that took out the foundational things. And then if you put it back, we know that at the US, we did at Belize, you have a focus by where they go on here. The second, when I taught my people in the Caribbean, man, I had to come to class ready because these people are flying all over me and they had I had to come to class ready. My last point I want to make on women empowerment, which is near and dear to me, is our family court system. My God, have mercy. The family court system in Belize was started by a man under the auspices of George Singh. But I tell you, the poor enforcement that I see in the family court now, I don't bash my director, because I think the new director there really tries. I think she inherited one serious crazy system. But when you find, understand me, simple things like maintenance, you ask me what happened to single women, they stress out. They stress out because they don't have money to feed their picnic. The man they pay for his own hiatus if you know they make his own other family, or he dead at jail. But he's simply not carrying his load. And the only hope the woman have, especially if she has a job that is not meeting ends, you have to go to the family court if you can run for the 5 picnic where you have. Then you go to the family court up and down, up and down, up and down. Orders are passed and hardly enforced. So people become frustrated. And to empower a woman, you have to feel that when it accesses the system, she's going to get the kind of satisfaction she needs, so I could clear her head and step to the next level. Most of the time you speak to women, my listen, I don't get involved in that. Right now, I had to try to make minds. I had to try to feed me picnic. I had to try to get our house. We have to create one system. Yes, a lot of the resolution is within us as people, but that resolution cannot come unless we get the kind of resources. And again, I go back to say that is why we must hold governments accountable. We must hold them accountable.
Can I make an observation here?
Yes, please go ahead, Mr. Collins.
I think we could all accept that the wealth of our nation state is not so much in its oil or its gold, but I think it's more in its human capital formation, the human beings, the human resource. Now, how best do we develop the human resource? Evidently, we all accept that it is through education and health. If we look at the budget of 1.5 billion, more or less, I think the largest share proportionately of that budget goes to education. And another large amount goes, I think, to health. And yes. I believe that defense holds a large part of it. But let's come back to the amount that goes towards education as one of the important input for human capital. Do you believe that we are getting the kind of output from that input and the results from that output? And I'm bringing it down in this, that what I see from my position as a chartered accountant, what I notice is that a lot of the money is going into more infrastructure, which is needed. You need the buildings, you need the furnitures. But I think we must need to put a little more thought. The curriculum is evidently needed. But what I find that one of the things that is extremely needed is how can we improve the teaching? How can we improve the imparting of knowledge to our students? And hopefully to begin to even pay teachers based on the performance as a result of how the children are improving. These are things that we could look at to see how we can tie your salaries to performance results, as we all should.
But I think the issue is more that the resources are there, the teachers are there, but it seems that the curriculum has been rigged in a way to produce a certain type of result that has not served us well, probably to help us with academics. I don't know if they remove, I was asking Ms. Willoughby some of those 4 subjects that she was talking about, specifically civics, general knowledge, and those, whether they were removed with some intent, because certainly if they weren't, and why were they? There's the fact that they are undermining the development of our young people and of our country has to be evident by now. And so the reason why they have not been put back, it could only make us be mystified and wondering what agenda might be going on that continues to have this as not being reintroduce into our curriculum for young people?
Mr. Chairman, can I get a shot at that question? And
Yes,
I'm
please, sir.
not going to suggest that your cynicism might have gone a little bit too far. And I say that simply because if you look at countries, I think the lady mentioned Finland. Finland rang among the top 10 countries in the world in the Human Development Index. If you look like countries like Singapore and you look like countries like Taiwan, if you watch the development plan, these 25 years, 20-year development plan, they're all geared towards building your education to suit the plan of your country. So right now, our country, as we all should accept, is suffering some very, is highly vulnerable to external shocks. Because we are too dependent on just the raw material from agriculture, which is highly vulnerable in the commodity markets. We have become even more dependent on tourism, which is highly vulnerable.
Yeah.
And in fact, it is posing a threat to the fragility of our nature-based product. And then what we left with some services. But the truth about it, this country needs to industrialize. So if we know that we want to plan the country towards industrialization, value-add agriculture, 90% of the world production comes from agriculture. So I think your educational system, apart from the values that it should include, and I must say this to you, that you can educate the brain, but if you don't educate the heart, that's no education. So I would say that we need to take a look now and say, well, listen, where do we want to go 25 years from now? And then we educate our people to be able to meet those demands of where we want to go. Evidently, there were some things that we have to continue to educate. But again, if you talk about educating people for the healthcare, if we say that we are going into a culture of prevention as the primary basis, it means that we will reduce secondary and tertiary care. So it means that down the road, we have to reduce the cost to healthcare because we are reducing the secondary and tertiary chronic diseases. But on the other hand, we have to be increasing now our inputs into education because that is where now we're going to build now the minds of our people to suit the future of this country. We are talking about AI or AIS.
Yeah.
Now, we are already at a stage where we're supposed to be introduce e-governance. So again, we are talking about technological age.
Yeah.
Are we now educating our people for the future?
Yeah.
And that is what I really like the doctor to coming out of a tertiary level institution, which I have a great respect.
Yeah, I'll give her a moment, but I do want to hear from Lisa and what she think are some of those issues that could help empower women in Belize.
Sorry to come back. Ms. Jacqueline and Ms. Dr. Flowers, I wanted to ask you if you think this is something akin to affirmative action that is in America. If we shouldn't maybe introduce something like that for our women, it's just to jumpstart the pathway to their equal opportunity. So maybe we should go for something akin to affirmative action to ensure that women will be able to get a share, not indefinitely, but to begin to get them to the point of equal opportunities that they will be prepared. Because if you leave it without affirmative action, without some conscious decision making, it will be difficult for them to make it in a world where men seem so prejudicial against women.
And that's what I was asking in some of the issues, trying to address some of the constitutional reform that's going on, whether some of those type of things should be considered to.
And listen to me good. We're not serious at this country, you hear? We're not serious at this country. I everything what you say, Minister Koi, sound beautiful, sweet, and almost like I read it out from a book already. But make we get down to brass tacks here. This thing simple. Until we stop playing politics in this country, none of the thing I want to fix. Because we still have that slavery mentality. Those who lead us still want us to be beggars under slavery. When you come out like me, you become a problem. And I'll be a problem till I dead. Because Horizon 2030, one of the best plans I have seen, it was all inclusive. It checked every area: education, poverty eradication, politics, accountability. It checked every area. It had the involvement of every sector of Belize. And in that Horizon 2030, it was decided that we will revamp the curriculum and make access better for young girls and young boys. It talked about the accountability and transparency. As one government left and the next one come in, Horizon 2030, the history. It became history. We then had Vision 2025. Where's are the people resources? Where's are the people resources? Because Vision 2025 borrowed some things from Horizon 2030. And then where did that document go? File 13. Then the IFIs came to Belize and they started to talk to us hard. Like when you borrow money from CDB and then brother, they want to dictate in your country how you want to live and how you want to move. And when they come into this country and they tell us certain things, then you see all kind of plans to get made. And that when policies don't mesh. Because now you only do something to suit the people so you could get more money. You're not thinking about your people. So AI, you're talking about AI, computer, all of that. We first have to get the II. We sort out the system for we people. This thing could fix easy. First, you have to have political will because I then pull the push string so they got money. We send almost 100 people at climate change. Gonna do what? What they gonna do there? When I could walk on the streets of Belize and still see young people on the street hungry. We provide in this country we have conversation with gang members. We pay them because we want them to behave themselves. But we have provided nothing for that class of people who are not gang members, but they must simply not get money for sending them to school. We don't do nothing for that crowd. We don't do nothing for that crowd unless they wave a particular party flag. So that crowd languish. And you know what part they end up? You know, my court. And then I have to send them to jail. So I make we get really. I tired of hear people sit down and talk policies and talk policies and talk policies and not get serious about putting things together so that people will eat and that the schools will produce people thinking and reasoning people, and that workers, when they get to a certain place, understand me, those social workers have they have the world on their shoulder. Because they're expected to run to the courts, they're expected to run to the hospital, they're expected to run everywhere because they are social workers who take care of families, children, and everybody else. And what happened? You frustrate them. You want to get a 1 year contract for work. And then when they're not move to your tune, you decide to send them home. No. We make good plans right here, so. I don't like people to tinker with my constitution because when you tinker with a constitution, you change a nation. There are certain things in the constitution I believe needs to be enhanced, but the reality of the situation is you could change the law from now till Jesus come. And if it is, you do not take the time out to implement, have good monitoring and evaluation, and provide the resources, you will waste my time and the taxpayers' dollars. That's what we do with all the commission and inquiry. That's what we do with the political 110 points. That's what we do with the Crooks report. We're supposed to make the police department better. That's what we do with every single reporter coming in this country. And then we trash our own. So I really tired of here. About these beautiful macroeconomic things, but because these things are not reaching my young people. And my young people, when they're transitioning across the bridge, before they could get to the other side, then drop the water. They die at the hands of crime. They die because they have no school reasoning skills. They're parentless. No, maybe not why here all thing them man. I said, fix the education system and follow on the plan.
Can I just come back in if you don't mind?
Come back.
It's all right to speak about the problems, and I agree with you, there are problems. It's all right to speak about what we want in terms of a systematic change, system change. But the truth of it, indeed, if we want to get down to the serious broad tacks of it, and I think Biggie Small said it right. You see, I want to change the world, first change yourself. We need to ask ourselves, where is the Rosa Parks? Where is the Martin Luther King? Where is the Malcolm X? Where are they to go out for civil disobedience, which is quite legitimate with any rule of law? Where are they? So I ask myself, where are these public officers? Where are these voters who seems every time to want to, yes, talk about the politicians, but the politicians are a product of us. They came from among us. And I keep saying, and I can speak up myself now, and I give you my experience. When I was in the government in 1998, I felt personally that we had gone astray and that the minister was abusing the public funds. The prudential rules has gone through the door. We had debts that we couldn't service. The DFC was in problem. The Social Security was. And I sat in a cabinet where, yes, some people were talking about it. I decided I go to resign.
But then you keep quiet. Did you tell the people of Belize all about that?
Well, they knew about it. If they
did you tell the people of Belize? We would have believed it more from you because you were a minister at the time and you were on the inside and you knew what was going on. You should have come and educated the people of Belize about that.
If you allow me to speak.
Speak.
I was the one who went before the parliament.
We just have a few more minutes to wrap up.
So I want to see if we can, I don't know, maybe it's the wrong time to raise this, but I wanted to say to you, from my personal experience, and I'm not trying to claim that I was all this Jesus Christ person. No. The truth about it, that I did take a stand and I resigned from that cabinet. But if the public didn't know I resigned, then I don't know who else could tell them I did. But what happened? 6 ministers decided to join me. And they joined me, and 7 of us ended up resigning. But what happened? The then Prime Minister had to give in because he had a choice. You stay with the status quo and the country goes down the public sector. We come back, we can carry out the fiscal consolidation. We went back and we turned it around. And the evidence is there. ECRA gave the evidence, World Bank gave the evidence. All of them came back to work with us. In 2008, I was given the order of the boot. Yes, I was kicked out. And why I was kicked out? Because the very people who I stood against, who were benefiting under that status quo, the UPs and UDPs, obviously what they do to you, they go against you. So to me, we have to ask ourselves, how much of us are prepared to make the sacrifice and at least have more of us supporting that person?
Thank you, Mr. Cowie. Dr. Angela, do you have any parting moments, points you want to make in the few minutes you have here?
Miss Willoughby, man, yes, we not say enough. We lap with tail pound behind because I haven't been living here all this time, but I come home and I have a hard time voicing my opinions and voicing my observations because sometimes I still feel like I didn't live in 1980, right? And I'm observing little by little what we are going through. It takes mind change. It takes, like Ms. Dietra Gillick says, social, emotional intelligence. And we lack that. We lack empathy for each other. We lack empathy for our community. And we lack the strength and the lioness in a way to go after, right? And it don't have to be about arguing all the time, but that we both with children. Right. And we don't see that. We see everything on the top, but for we children. So for me personally, the way I am going to go ahead, and I'm going to leave you guys with this, the way I believe that I will start giving back what I know and navigate this community that I have rediscovered is by dealing with our children. Because then after we future, we don't kind of blast we self already out of the water. So the only thing I think I can do is start working with our children to see where we can get in the next 10 to 15 years, God's willing, that I am able to see that far ahead.
Thank you very much. Ms. Willoughby, could you give us your thoughts and closing comments?
I feel that along with all the solutions that I have put forward already, government need to start listening. Governments need to start listening, and citizens need to know to understand their power of the vote, and know full well that it doesn't end on election day. You have to have power groups that will continue to remind the government, not of their manifesto, but of the obligation they owe to funny children, to the old lady, the entire spectrum. But if you create the healthy foundation, by the time you reach the middle, the building will be sturdy, and we're failing in that area.
Mr. Coe, you got 1 minute.
Well, my parting shot will simply be, I still hold strongly to the belief that we have to begin to not just speak about the problems. I think we need to look to find for the solutions. And I have the faith in the Belizean people that with us will come the solutions to the problems that this country. And I would hope indeed that the men, I must say, will have to come to the consciousness that women are leaders also, and they have a lot to contribute to this development. And I will end on that.
Thank you. Lisa, I'll give you a couple of minutes to help us close out here.
Sure, Dr. Flowers and Mrs. Willoughby, thank you for joining us this evening. Mr. Coe, as always, as our co-host, and Chairman, you did a great job. As far as just a recap, I do appreciate you both ladies and, coming on the show and inspiring not only those listening as women, but myself. I recently gave my power away, which I am getting ready to regain. And that's one of the main problems with us Belizean women. It's not also because we're motherly to men, but we allow men, we give them our power all the time. And I think that's one of the things that we need to start educating our young women very young, that we cannot allow them to, we need to teach them that they need to know the value and their worth. And if we don't teach them early, we will not progress to that seat at the table. One of my opinions. As far as the education system, I wasn't raised in Belize, but I do understand that we need a different curriculum. And one of those things is trying to introduce more one-on-one groups for children. I remember when I was very little, I was part of the Girls Guide program, and I learned a lot of general skill sets being in that program. I think programs such as those will give growth to our young women and young men as well. And as far as the educational system, yes, it does need to be rehashed, especially where we want our children to understand civics and how we govern ourselves in Belize, because we're going to continue with the same path, not focusing on transparency and or accountability and allowing others to make decisions for us without us being at the table. And I mean that all citizens will lose at the end of the day. And again, like I said, there's a lot of things Ms. Willoughby brought to our attention that we can do. I think it's soluble. It's us putting in an action. And if we don't start acting upon it, then, as they say in the streets, talk is cheap. Action speaks louder than words. And yes, we do need to come together as a village and as a community. If not, we're going to lose not only we've already lost a good portion of our development. If we intend not to continue to lose that, we need to start now and put those actions in place.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm just thinking that next week when we join again, we would have concluded the United States presidential election. And Mr. Cowie mentioned that it is impacting to the world as we know it. And so I urge all Belizean American within the diaspora of the United States to go out and exercise their franchise of voting and to serve and vote.
They better vote because I the way that Belize and I vote. So they better go vote. When we hear our American Belizeans, Belizean Americans that in United States right now, please, I beg you.
So
got it, Dr. Flowers.
You got the warning. So someone is going to come and get you. So thank you all for joining us in the audience this evening. We saw your comments. We didn't get a chance to really answer them, but it did flavor the conversation that we were having as we discussed those items and try to bring those points out. So thank you all, and please join us again next Wednesday. Good evening.
Thank you, ladies, and thank you, gentlemen.
Please, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Producer, thank you very much, and good night.
General above, ready for get no forgive. Aggressive, assertive, attentive, innovative. Black people representative. We want to just lean back and check remotive. Sing out right now. Youth them they kill one another. Right now all the time. Freely pray to the Father. Right now. Belize under fire. Right now. Right now. Right now. Right now. The youth them they kill one another. Right now all the time. Freely pray to the Father. Right now. Spread the news to your brother. Right now. Right now. Right now. Right now. Blind lead the blind. Prophecies fulfilled. Signs of the time. When Satan billions them call it white collar crime. Granny scrape the pennies, but she cannot find a dime in the country. One more wrong and that them coke and wine. If vanity, then they try this time and time. So them might get snatched up from behind and bleed to the eye when they bind the twine. Cause of them economy on decline. Moral fabric of society on decline. Ecosystem on decline. Them could have started all day one thing they can't find. And that's a peace of mind. Sing right now. You say me kill one another. Right now in the time. Truly pray to the Father. Right now. Belize under fire. Right now. Right now. Right now. Right now. You say me kill one another. Right now in the time. Truly pray to the Father. Right now. Spread the news to your brother. Right now. Right now. Right now. Right now. Hey boy, move savage. Poor people need 10 more stimulus package. So all them food, but don't cause all the damage. Boom. Yes, I know find nothing in the wreckage. Big cigar, hunting cottage. Why see the globe check? Horse and carriage. Look like they want with this start eat out a garbage. Bump that, red that, melon flip bust like cabbage. Wake up, smelly raw sewage. Junk stomach to digest all the carnage. Poor people not forgetting no left wing. So them left way, the whole is thinking luggage. And more ever did get the message. Read the Bible but miss certain passages. Collins, pop two Cockneys. Once again, Collins. Yo, respect on them and smoke it on. Once a body, international. Oh, here we go. Me and me body will come face set it. Respect you, all Belizean prophets. Yeah, yo, yo. We know this seek no static. You da gunman, me have to the beg, no fi stop it. Me ball again. Me and me jet will come face set it. Respect you. Hi, hey, hi. We know this seek no static. And if you da gunman, please stop it. You have Lord Raven, Kenny Morgan, Papa Curly that they chase the boy named Sam Master Lee, Chico and Carlton Brown, Jim Love, everybody run town. See when them youth decide to fill a song, the concrete foundation so that they can't fall down. Some young shots in the big fish get me included the beat. Check on the teacher when them draw down the slate. Pay attention now the tune so intricate. Wicked style, no food duplicate. Me and me judge when they come for setting. Respect you, all seek no static. And if you would a bad man, after the beg, no fi stop it. We ball again. Me and body come fi set it. Respect you. Wow, wow, wow. We know they seek no static. You would a gunman. Please stop it. Don't forget about mobile. Man lucky. Mohabab, the art and the one on the B. Rasherman and me Peter. Legendary. Rasbana sing the song. She only want me. Plus the female artists like Heavy D. Rock down gal and Tanya C. Tamika and me friend Sweetie. All about the rules and reality we sing. Me and body when they come fi set it. Respect jubilees and profits. Yo, we know they seek no static. You the bad man. Please stop it. We sing again. Me and smoke when they come fi set it. Respect you all beliefs and profits. Yo, wow, wow, wow. If Christ say stop it. If you the bad man, please stop it. One more time. Me and me judge when they come fi set it. Respect you all beliefs and profits. Yo, yo, yo. We know they seek no static. And if you the gunman, please stop it. For Christ, yo. Me and me judge come fi set it. Respect you. Wow, wow, wow.
International body.